It happened in a restaurant in Boston. Candlelight, soft music, the kind of place you book weeks in advance because you want the night to feel special. I thought it was just going to be me and Daniel, my husband of 6 years. A night to reconnect. Maybe even fix what had quietly started to feel unfixable. But then, she showed up. His mother, without warning. No text, no call. Just appearing at our table like it was perfectly normal. Like she belonged. And Daniel? He waved her over, pulled out a chair, smiled like this was exactly what he'd hoped for. I excused myself to the bathroom, but I didn't go there. I walked right out the front door, didn't say a word, didn't look back. That was the moment I knew. I was done trying, done pretending, done waiting for someone to choose. Me. What came after that night was a spiral of truth I never saw coming. Secrets buried under fake smiles, legal documents tampered with behind my back. Money I never touched, moved like pieces on a chessboard I didn't even know I was part of. For years, I thought I was fighting for our marriage. Turns out, I was the only one in it. How did I not see it sooner? Why did I keep excusing the little things? Like the fact she had a key to our place, or that Daniel always seemed more worried about her feelings than mine? I used to tell myself, it's just her way, or he means well. I didn't. Notice how those excuses were slowly hollowing me out. My needs shrank so his comfort could expand. I laughed when I wanted to cry. I apologized when I should have stood up. I softened my voice, my opinions, even my personality, just to keep the peace. This isn't just a story about a mother-in-law who overstepped. It's about the slow erosion of trust. About how love, when it's tangled in guilt and control, stops being love at all. But I didn't just walk out of that restaurant. I walked into a version of myself I hadn't seen in years. The one who stops asking for permission. The one who starts asking better questions. What I found after I left, it's worse than I ever imagined. And maybe exactly what I needed. I met Daniel at a mutual friend's housewarming. He was standing in the kitchen, helping the host unpack wine glasses while everyone else buzzed around trying to find the playlist. He had this calm energy. Nothing flashy, just steady. We started talking about our favorite cities and we both said Montreal at the exact same time. It was small, silly, but it felt like something. Things moved fast after that. Dates turned into weekends. Weekends into a lease. He made me feel safe, at least at first. He listened. He asked questions. He was thoughtful in the ways you'd hope someone would be when you're falling for them. And for a while, I really believed I had found the person who saw me. We got married just over a year later. A small ceremony, friends, a few cousins. Claudia was there, of course. But even then, there were warning signs. She insisted on wearing white, made a speech that was more about her son than it was about our marriage. I remember standing there, smiling politely, telling myself not to make a big deal out of it. It was just one day. One weird moment, not worth starting anything over. But little things kept stacking. Claudia called every morning, showing up unannounced, taking it personally when I suggested Daniel and I spend holidays alone. Just once. She didn't yell. She didn't fight. She just pouted, sighed, made herself look hurt. Like I was pushing her out of her own son's life. At first, Daniel would say things like, "That's just how she is." Or, "She means well, babe. She really likes you." And I wanted to believe him. I didn't grow up with a close-knit family, so part of me thought maybe this was what that looked like. Maybe I was the one who needed to adapt. But then there was the time we came home from a weekend away, and she was inside our apartment. She said she was just watering the plants. The plants were fake. Or the time she rearranged our living room while we were at work because she thought it flowed better. She had opinions about everything, our furniture, the way I dressed, the books I kept on the shelf. And when I tried to set boundaries, even the softest ones, she'd act like I was attacking her, like I was trying to erase her from her son's life. I brought it up to Daniel, again and again, gently, then firmly, and every time he would say, "I'll talk to her." But nothing changed. He never actually did. Or if he did, She ignored him, and he let her. Still, I kept telling myself that relationships take work, that no one's family is perfect. Maybe if I just kept trying, things would settle. It's hard to explain how denial becomes part of your daily routine. You don't wake up and decide to ignore red flags. You just start focusing on all the little green ones. The nice dinner he made, the apology after a tough night, the weekend getaway, where it felt like just the two of us again. I clung to those moments like proof. Proof that the good outweighed the bad, that the love was real, that I wasn't just some extra in a script written by his mother. But deep down, I think I already knew. Something wasn't right. I just wasn't ready to face how wrong it actually was. It got worse after our second anniversary. Claudia started dropping comments that sounded sweet until you actually listened. Things like, "He's never looked healthier since you started cooking less," or, "I'm just so glad he still has someone who understands him." She'd smile as she said it, like she was complimenting me, but it was always a dig, always a reminder that I was, in her eyes, temporary. She didn't yell. That would have been too obvious. She eroded me slowly, with side eyes and sighs and backhanded concern. She made herself the authority on everything: Daniel's job, our finances, the way we decorated our apartment. It felt like I was living in a house with a ghost. One who didn't pay rent but ran the show. And Daniel? He called it keeping the peace. Said I was reading too much into things. Every time I tried to open up, I was met with silence or defensiveness. He wasn't cruel. He was vacant. He'd shut down completely or crack a joke to change the subject. The more I asked him to stand up for us, the more he leaned away. There were moments where I caught glimpses of who he used to be, like when he booked a weekend in Maine just for the two of us. No phones, no interruptions. But the second we got back, it was like flipping a switch. Claudia would text 3 times before lunch, and by dinner, I was invisible again. She had a way of keeping herself at the center. She'd call him during meetings, claiming it was an emergency. Once, she faked a fall just to get him to cancel plans with me. I found out later from a neighbor that she'd been seen jogging that morning. At some point, she got into the habit of buying things for our home. Furniture, appliances, things I hadn't asked for, didn't want, and didn't pick. She'd say it was her gift to us, but it always came with strings. She once bought us a new mattress and said, "Now you'll finally get some real rest." As if my choices hadn't been good enough. I felt like a tenant in my own marriage. Like my voice only echoed, never landed. I started keeping things to myself. Not out of fear, but out of exhaustion. Why bring it up if nothing would change? And deep down, I started to see the pattern. Claudia didn't just overstep. She controlled. And Daniel didn't just avoid conflict. He submitted. He let her carve space out of our life until there was barely any left for me. I thought love was about partnership. But this didn't feel like a partnership anymore. It felt like survival. Like I had to defend my existence every single day. I wasn't trying to be the center of Daniel's world. I just wanted to be in it. But no matter what I did, I was always on the outside. I started questioning myself. Was I being too sensitive, too demanding, too emotional? But every time I turned those questions inward, I lost a little more of myself. The truth is, I was trying to build a life with someone who had never fully left his mother's. And the more I tried to pull him forward, the harder he clung to her. Eventually, I stopped wondering if I was enough for him, and started asking if he was ever really mine to begin with. At some point, I stopped being surprised when Claudia showed up without warning. It was always for something small, dropping off soup, needing help with her laptop, saying she was just in the neighborhood, even though she lived 40 minutes away. She had a key, of course. Daniel gave it to her when we first moved in, just in case. I asked him, more than once, to change the locks or at least talk to her, but he didn't want to upset her. He said she meant well, that we were lucky to have someone who cared so much. But that didn't matter. It was an intrusion. Constant, relentless intrusion. And I was the one always expected to smooth things over. I became the emotional airbag for both of them, managing her feelings so Daniel wouldn't feel caught in the middle, managing his silence so things wouldn't explode. I started censoring myself, tiptoeing around conversations, smiling through discomfort, biting my tongue during dinners that felt more like performances than family time. I was constantly calculating. What would keep things calm? What could I let go of? Just this once to avoid another argument? It felt like my entire emotional bandwidth was being spent on keeping someone else's peace, never my own. And the weight of it, that invisible pressure, started to bleed into everything. My friendships faded because I was too drained to keep up. My work began to suffer because I was always distracted, always somewhere else in my mind. I'd sit through meetings thinking about the way Claudia rearranged our kitchen cabinets again, or how Daniel brushed me off the night before when I tried to talk about boundaries. It wasn't just that she came over uninvited. It was the way Daniel would light up when she did. The way he'd pour her wine before asking if I even wanted any. The way he'd laugh with her about how dramatic I could be when I voiced frustration. It was killed by 1,000 cuts. I wasn't just dealing with Claudia. I was dealing with a partner who kept handing me the broom to sweep up the mess, then acted confused when I said I was tired. One night, I was lying in bed after another fight that ended in nothing. No resolution, no apology. And I realized something that gutted me. I hadn't felt safe in my own home in months. Not physically unsafe, just emotionally unwelcome. Like my presence was tolerated, not cherished. What I used to love about coming home, the quiet, the soft rituals, the way I could finally exhale, all of that was gone. Our apartment didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like a waiting room where Claudia might walk in at any moment and criticize the magazines. And what made it worse was that Daniel saw it. He wasn't clueless. He saw my eyes go dim. He heard the silence stretch. He noticed the way I started sleeping on the edge of the bed. But he never reached for me, never asked what was wrong, because asking would mean he had to face it, and facing it meant choosing. So instead, he didn't. He let me carry the weight, the explanations, the justifications, the compromises. I was doing the work of 3 people, keeping the peace, protecting the relationship, and trying to hold on to myself. But that last part, that was slipping. I could feel it. And that scared me more than anything Claudia could ever do. He made the reservation weeks in advance. Said he wanted to take me somewhere special. Just the 2 of us. Boston, waterfront, one of our favorites. I remember thinking, maybe this means something. Maybe he's finally seeing what I've been trying to say all along. Maybe this is a beginning, not the end. I got dressed up, took my time, curled my hair, wore the earrings he gave me for our 3rd anniversary. The whole ride there, I held on to the silence between us like it might break into something good. The restaurant was beautiful, warm lighting, clinking glasses, couples leaned in across tables. And for a moment, it almost felt normal again, like it used to. He reached for my hand, smiled, said, "I've missed this." And then she walked in. Claudia, as if the entire night hadn't been meant for us, as if she belonged there. She didn't look surprised to see us. She looked like she'd been invited, because she had been. Daniel stood up, waved her over, pulled out a chair. He said, "Look who was nearby. I thought it'd be nice." Nice. I stared at him like I didn't recognize his face, like maybe I was the one who had misunderstood. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. My body moved before my mouth could. I stood up. I walked out. And this time, I didn't wait for him to follow me. I didn't cry on the sidewalk. I didn't pace or panic or spin stories in my head trying to explain what just happened. I just felt it. That quiet knowing. That cold, sharp moment where you realize you've stayed too long. This wasn't dinner. It was the final answer. A confirmation of everything I'd been afraid to say out loud. He had invited her to our night, without telling me, without thinking it might matter. And worse, he thought I'd be okay with it. He thought I'd smile through it, make conversation, pretend again. But I couldn't, because that night wasn't about Claudia crashing dinner. It was about Daniel choosing her, again, publicly, casually, as if my place at that table was negotiable. It was such a small moment, but something in me snapped. Not loud. Not dramatic, just a quiet internal shift, like a door finally closing. I walked 2 blocks before I realized I had nowhere to go. I wasn't even sure what I was leaving behind, except everything I had once hoped this could be. I called a friend, asked if I could crash for the night. I didn't tell her what happened. I couldn't, not yet. Not because I was ashamed, but because if I said it out loud, it would become real. And it was real. That night was the moment the house came down. No yelling, no dramatic fight. Just one final, quiet crack in the foundation. The next morning, I didn't go back. I didn't even text him. I just stayed in that borrowed guest room with a cup of coffee and silence, and for the first time in years, the silence felt kind. Because something in me had shifted for good. I wasn't going to beg anymore. I wasn't going to explain why I needed to be respected, why I deserve privacy, or why a marriage should feel like a team, not a trap. That night, I left the table. And I never sat back down. I didn't rush. I didn't make any hasty decisions. But something inside me was waking up and it wasn't willing to go back to sleep. I started small. First, I opened a separate bank account, just in case. A small step, but enough to know I wasn't completely dependent on him. Enough to start taking back some control, even if it was just a tiny bit. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my family. I didn't want to hear what they'd say. Not yet. I didn't need their opinions. I didn't need to explain myself. It was just me, alone in my thoughts, alone in my determination. I began keeping track of everything. Little things at first. Her uninvited visits, the text messages she sent when I wasn't around. They seemed insignificant on their own, but together they told a story I couldn't ignore. I'd catch myself looking at legal websites late at night, reading about trust funds, property rights, and divorce settlements. I wasn't just preparing to leave emotionally. I was preparing to leave with everything I needed to get out of there, for good. And while I did that, he kept coming home later. He was more distant, more distracted. He didn't even notice the changes. Or maybe he did, but he was too afraid to acknowledge them. I wasn't surprised. I stopped expecting him to notice, stopped hoping for him to step up. I'd given him enough chances, enough reminders, enough soft requests. But nothing changed. One afternoon, I found the documents. I wasn't looking for them. They were just there, hidden in a drawer I'd never thought to open before. Legal papers with Claudia's name on them. She was listed as a joint owner on our property deed. My heart stopped. I didn't know what I was seeing at first. I thought maybe I was misreading it. But the longer I looked, the clearer it became. She had been added without my knowledge. My husband had signed papers behind my back, allowing her to take ownership of our home. The rage didn't come immediately. It was more like a shock. A slow realization of just how deeply I had been deceived, how complicit Daniel had been in her scheme. I didn't confront him that day. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I made a call to a lawyer. A good one. A woman who had been through her own share of battles. She listened, took notes, and assured me that I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining things. What I was dealing with wasn't just manipulation. It was a fraud. That was the moment I knew I had to act, not just for me, but for my future. The lawyer didn't tell me what to do. She didn't make promises, but she gave me options. And options meant I wasn't powerless. I started organizing. Everything I had learned, everything I had discovered, went into a folder. I printed out bank statements, property records, and every email or text message where Claudia had crossed a line. Every time she'd overstepped, every time Daniel had dismissed me. The more I gathered, the clearer it became. I wasn't just fighting for a marriage. I was fighting to get my life back. I wasn't sure what it would look like after all this was over, but I was starting to feel something I hadn't felt in years: confidence. I wasn't stuck. I wasn't invisible. And when the time came, I would walk away. For good. I thought. I had already seen the worst of it. I thought the dinner in Boston, the property deed, and Daniel's silence were the peak of the betrayal. I was wrong. About 2 weeks after speaking with my lawyer, I got a strange piece of mail. It wasn't addressed to me, it was addressed to Claudia Bennett. Our last name, our building, same street, same unit number, except for the floor. 2 floors below us. At first, I assumed it was a mistake, but something didn't sit right. I took the envelope down to the front desk and asked casually if anyone by that name lived in the building. The woman at the desk looked at me like I was asking a question I already knew the answer to. "Oh, Claudia, yeah. She's been here a few months now. You're related, right?" I nodded, not even knowing why. I went back upstairs in silence, heart pounding. Claudia was living 2 floors beneath me, no announcement, no heads up. No reason for her to be that close to us, unless she had planned to be, unless Daniel had helped her. I checked the lease records through the online property portal. She hadn't just moved in. She was listed as a co-resident under Daniel's emergency contact form. She wasn't crashing temporarily. This was her new home. He had helped her do it, set it up, kept it hidden from me. I remember standing in the kitchen, holding my laptop, and just sitting down on the floor, not crying, not yelling, just stunned. It was never just about a meddling mother-in-law. It was about control, about creating a life that kept her close, no matter how it crushed me in the process. It wasn't just emotional betrayal anymore. It was a pattern of secrets designed to keep me small and out of the loop. My lawyer helped me dig deeper. We requested full title history and traced every property modification for the past 5 years. That's when we found something even more disturbing. Claudia had been listed as a trustee on a fund Daniel and I had both contributed to. The paperwork made it seem like she had partial financial authority over assets that were legally supposed to belong to us. And again, my signature was nowhere. I never signed a thing. The documents had Daniel's name, Claudia's, but not mine. Every time I thought I had uncovered the worst of it, something else surfaced. It was like pulling a thread that never ended. Everything I had helped build, our home, our finances, even our future, was quietly altered behind my back. I started wondering if anything about our marriage had ever truly included me, if I had ever really been a partner in it, or just a placeholder. Because while I was busy compromising, sacrificing, and giving Daniel the benefit of the doubt, they were closing ranks, drawing legal lines, setting me up to lose everything. I thought about all the times Claudia said she only wanted what was best for her son. I finally realized what that meant. It meant keeping me powerless. It meant writing me out while smiling to my face. But here's the part that changed everything. I wasn't afraid anymore. Every discovery, every lie, every forged piece of paper gave me more resolve. I didn't feel powerless. I felt ready. I wasn't unraveling. I was getting clearer, sharper. And for the first time, I saw exactly what I was up against, and exactly who I was becoming. About a week after we discovered the trust fund discrepancies, Daniel sent me a message. Not a phone call, not a face-to-face conversation, just a cold, sterile email with the subject line, "Something to sign." I opened it, expecting maybe divorce papers. Instead, it was a PDF labeled Quick Claim Deed Agreement. No context, no message. Just a document asking me to relinquish any legal claim to the condo. My name wasn't even typed properly, just an empty line at the bottom waiting for my signature, waiting for me to erase myself. I didn't respond. I sent it straight to my lawyer. She reviewed it, took a long breath, and said, "This is a trap." The wording was vague enough to make it seem casual, like it was just a routine transfer. But buried in the fine print were terms that would have handed full ownership of our property to Claudia, retroactively. It was designed to make it look like I had always been a guest in my own home. I hadn't seen it coming, not that way. I expected more lies, more manipulation. But this was calculated, a final legal chess move meant to seal me out for good. And if I had signed it, that would have been it. No rights, no leverage, nothing to fight for. What stung the most wasn't even the paperwork. It was that Daniel had sent it so casually. No conversation, no explanation, just an attachment, like it was a recipe or a newsletter. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I was tempted to sign it, but because I finally understood. He was no longer confused. He wasn't torn. He had chosen, fully, willingly. It wasn't just Claudia trying to push me out anymore. It was both of them. That realization didn't hurt like I thought it would. It clarified things. It removed the last excuse I'd been making for him. He wasn't trying to protect anyone. He was trying to erase me quietly, before I had the chance to stop it. But I didn't sign. Of course I didn't sign. Instead, my lawyer drafted a formal response, clear, direct, and legal. We rejected the claim, filed a protective injunction, froze the property title until we could fully investigate the trust fund fraud and deed manipulation. She also began preparing a counterclaim to contest every transaction Claudia had been involved in. This wasn't just about emotion anymore. This was about justice, about reclaiming what had been mine, what I had invested in, what I had built, both materially and emotionally. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't reacting. I was planning. I began documenting everything, every call, every interaction, every new piece of evidence. Claudia had gotten away with so much because she operated in the shadows, smiling, in public, manipulating behind closed doors. But now the lights were on. I told my lawyer something I hadn't said out loud before. I'm not just leaving, I'm holding them accountable. Because this wasn't just a betrayal. It was theft. It was emotional abuse dressed up as family loyalty. It was manipulation with legal consequences. They had tried to lock me out of my own life. But they underestimated one thing. I had nothing left to lose, and everything to reclaim. And this time, I wasn't going quietly. The meeting was arranged through the lawyers, neutral ground. A small office in Cambridge that looked more like a dentist's waiting room than the place my marriage would finally implode. Daniel walked in first. Eyes low, hands in his pockets. Claudia followed, dressed like she was attending a board meeting, expensive. Blazer, soft fake concern on her face. She smiled at me, like we were just two women in a misunderstanding. She had no idea what was coming. My lawyer sat beside me, calm, prepared, and then Nora arrived, Claudia's sister. I hadn't seen her in years. She wasn't close with the family. I always thought she kept her distance out of disinterest, but it turns out she was staying away for her own protection. She looked directly at Claudia and didn't say hello. My lawyer opened the folder. One by one, she laid out the documents, bank transfers, trust fund withdrawals, forged signatures, everything we had gathered. Claudia stayed quiet at first, eyes darting, trying to gauge how much we really knew. Then Nora leaned forward and said, "It's time to tell the truth." Claudia laughed, short, dismissive. "There's nothing to tell." But Nora didn't flinch. "I saw the paperwork, the transfers, the fake loan agreements. You used our parents' trust fund. You funneled money into Daniel's account. You changed the deed behind her back." Daniel didn't say a word, not one. My heart wasn't pounding. My hands weren't shaking. I had expected this moment to feel explosive, but instead it felt like watching a glass finally shatter after you've seen the cracks for years. Nora continued calmly but firmly. "I warned you, Claudia. You didn't listen. And now she's going to take everything back." That's when Claudia cracked. Not loudly. But her voice wavered. She said, "You don't understand. He needed help. She was going to ruin him." That's when I stood up. I looked directly at her and said, "You ruined him. You taught him to hide, to lie, to avoid. And I let it go, for years. But I'm done being quiet." Daniel still didn't speak. He didn't look at me, didn't try to explain. And honestly, that silence told me everything I still needed to know. The meeting ended quickly after that. My lawyer served notice of the injunction and began formal proceedings to separate all joint assets, freeze titles, and initiate fraud investigations. She was already drafting subpoenas. The bank records were enough to open inquiries. Claudia's name would be flagged on every account tied to ours. Daniel was given a list of legal obligations. He barely reacted. As I walked out of that room, I didn't feel broken. I felt clean, like something toxic had finally been cut away. The damage was real, but so was my resolve. I wasn't walking out empty-handed. I was walking out with proof, with clarity, and, finally, with power. Claudia didn't stop me. Daniel didn't chase after me. They had played their game. And they lost. And the best part? I didn't have to scream to be heard. I let the evidence speak. I let the silence speak. Because sometimes, the loudest thing in the room is the person who no longer needs to beg to be respected. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks after the confrontation. It wasn't drawn out. Once the fraud was exposed, the rest unraveled quickly. Claudia backed down once she realized there would be real consequences, legal ones. She signed the required documents, transferred the property, disappeared from the financial picture like a ghost that had finally lost her power. Daniel didn't fight. He showed up to court wearing a suit 2 sizes too big and the same hollow expression he'd worn for the last year of our marriage. He agreed to everything. No contest, no apology, just quiet compliance. And honestly, I didn't need an apology by then. I didn't want explanations. I didn't want closure in the form of half-hearted regrets. I wanted peace, and I got it. The title to the property was returned fully to my name. The trust fund was locked down. My lawyer helped me open a fraud investigation. I wasn't out for revenge, I was out for truth, for accountability, for proof that I had never imagined what I lived through. And then I changed my name back. It was the smallest task on the to-do list, but the most meaningful. I wasn't trying to erase the past. I was reclaiming who I was before all of this. The woman who trusted herself, who didn't make herself smaller to keep a man comfortable, who didn't walk on eggshells to keep the peace. I moved out of the condo 3 weeks later, packed what was mine, left what wasn't. I didn't take photos, didn't look back at each room. That place had never really been mine. It had been a stage for someone else's script, one I was finally done performing. I got a small apartment across the river. Nothing special. 1 bedroom, 2nd floor, no view. But it was mine. Completely. Mine. I bought my own dishes. I actually liked it. Slept diagonally across the bed. I started saying yes to things again. Dinners with friends, weekend hikes, long phone calls that had nothing to do with fixing anyone's crisis. I started feeling light again. Not happy all the time, not perfect, but free. There were moments when the past crept back in, usually in the quiet, when I was washing dishes or locking up at night. But it didn't own me anymore. I didn't rebuild overnight. Healing didn't come in one big wave. It came in tiny, steady steps. Being my own bills, trusting my own decisions, laughing without checking the room. I kept the folder, though, the one with all the evidence. It sits in the back of my closet, not because I need it, but because it reminds me of something important, that I wasn't crazy, that what happened was real, and that walking away was not a failure. It was the most powerful thing I've ever done. And if you're listening to this thinking you might be in your own version of this story, let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. Love should not feel like survival. It should not cost you your voice, your identity, your peace. Silence isn't loyalty. Sacrifice isn't love. And leaving is not giving up. It's choosing yourself.